Hello, everybody, and welcome to the alumni of Jimmy and Rosalynn Carter School for Peace and Conflict Resolution at George Mason University. I'm Hussein Halane, treasurer of the Carter School Alumni Charter. I'm also a former graduate of the school with a different name, but that doesn't matter. And I'm pleased to welcome our chairman, our group chairman, Fitz Shipp, to take over and introduce the panel and the members of the group. Thank you.
Thank you, Halane. Welcome, everybody. We are really excited to be with you. Before we dive in and introduce myself and the panelists, we had just a few items we wanted to share about the conversation today. As many of you know, each semester, the Carter School Peace Week brings together faculty, students, and alumni, as well as friends and partners from across peace and conflict resolution community for a week-long conversation around how to effectively address urgent issues of peace and justice. Our theme for Peace Week is Rethinking Peace 2022 and beyond. In this session, you'll hear from me and other fellow alumni share how their careers developed following their journey at the Carter School. We're hoping that our panel will open up ideas around how to rethink about entering a career in peace. With us today, we have David Smith, Josh Weiss, and Raquel Gonzalez. We'll give an opportunity for them to introduce themselves shortly. And you may have noticed we also had planned on hearing from Alex Rosenwald, Lindsay Burr, and Nicole Roswell. They were unable to join us today. We are still very grateful for their meaningful contributions to the Carter School. And just a little bit about me. So as Halane mentioned, I am the president of the Carter School Alumni Chapter. We welcome you to reach out anytime to me or any one of us on the Carter School Chapter Board. We'd love to have you involved. In terms of career, I am the Director of Labor Strategic Sourcing at Hilton, based out in Tysons Corner, Virginia. I attended the Carter School as part of the Malta partnership back in 2011 and 2012 and found it to just be a fantastic experience. So really grateful to be part of the community and to be your host today. So with that, feel free to use the chat feature throughout the discussion. I've loved some of the chats so far already. The Alexis is probably not Alexis themselves, but the dog looks very comfortable. And keep the chats coming. We also will have some time for Q&A at the end of the prepared remarks. So if you have any questions for us, we'd love to hear them, whether they be about our recent experience professionally or kind of how we got to where we are. We welcome your questions. One last note, there will be an opportunity to come off mute, but also this call is being recorded. So just wanted to remind everybody of that. So again, happy to be here. And with that, we'll start with introductions. So I'd like to begin by introducing David Smith. And David, we'd love to hear a little bit more about you.
So great, thanks Fitz. And I'm glad to be here. I thought I would do it in a chronological way, both to talk about myself and to show how people's careers change over time. So I'll start off by saying that I'm 62 years old. So I've been in the field a while, but in really different ways. So my first career was I was a lawyer, practiced law for 10 years, didn't like practicing law, actually moved from practicing law to mediation, learned mediation in the late 1990s when we were just starting family mediation. Left that, then I went and taught in a community college for about 10 years. While I was there, I was brought in to run and to start a community mediation program in the county when I was living. Then I went on a Fulbright, taught ADR and peace studies as a Fulbright. Left the community college, I went to USIP. I was at USIP for about 10 years. And at USIP, I was the director of national outreach, worked from colleges and universities around the US. After 10 years, I left USIP, I went out on my own, formed an NGO that does humanitarian education, started teaching at the Carter School, wrote a book, and more importantly than anything else, I'm a career coach. So I work with young people or people starting their careers, but people who maybe are more seasoned in their careers. And I run the career seminar at the Carter School besides teaching several courses there. So it's about myself, but maybe in a more chronological way. So thanks, Fitz.
Thanks, David. That's awesome. Raquel, we'll turn it over to you next.
Hi, everyone. Raquel Gonzalez. I use she or they pronouns. I am a 2012 graduate of the Carter School, the Master's in Conflict Analysis and Resolution, but also went to Mason for undergrad as well before that. And most of my career experience has actually been in government up until recently. I was fortunate enough to serve as a political appointee in Barack Obama's both terms of his administration, working at the Department of Energy, Department of Education, Peace Corps, Department of Agriculture, and the White House. And so have some experience with policy and strategic planning and personnel, and really trying to approach peace building through like policies that are inclusive and include communities and are human-centered, really. And then recently have been getting involved in social justice nonprofit work. So I'm currently the chief operating officer at a Oakland-based social justice nonprofit called the Center for Cultural Power, where we help advance narrative strategy, which is basically telling stories that are going to change people's hearts and minds. So if you think of like that movie Don't Look Up, where they were really focusing on climate change in a way that was hopefully getting folks to pay attention, that's the sort of work that I'm doing now to try to advance narratives around peace. Excited to be here with you and share more.
Great, thanks, Raquel. And we'll introduce our final panelist, Josh.
Great, thanks, Fitz. Hi, everybody. My name is Josh Weiss. I graduated from what was ICAR at the time, back in 2002 with my Ph.D. I would say that my sort of journey around all of this, very briefly, I got my master's at American University in international politics with a concentration in peace and conflict resolution. And then I moved back to the Boston area where I grew up and started working at the program on negotiation at Harvard Law School. And I was there for about 3 years and sort of decided that a PhD would be an interesting endeavor to go down. And so started down that road and then went back to Harvard and worked at the program on negotiation for about 10 years full time. After that, with William Ury, he and I began a project there called the Global Negotiation Initiative. And so today, I'll just fast forward. So I kind of wear 3 hats today. The first one is to co-direct that project with William Still, and we work on a lot of different projects internationally. I also have my own consulting company where I do a lot of teaching, training, consulting, and that runs the gamut from working with engineers to governments to museum directors, you name it, any place where there's conflict or negotiation skills needed and things along those lines. That's where I go. And then I also, about 8 years ago, I actually live about an hour from Boston. A smaller university here called Bay Path University reached out to me and asked me if I was interested in developing a master's degree program for them. I said yes, and thought it would be a laborious process, but fortunately it was a small school that's very entrepreneurial. So it wasn't. I designed it to be entirely online. So it's a master's in leadership and negotiation, and I direct that program and teach in it and all that kind of fun stuff. So lots of balls in the air. But very happy to be with everybody and happy to share whatever I can with all of you as you're getting started in this interesting and crazy endeavor in the peace and conflict resolution field.
Great. Great. Thank you, all of you, for joining once again. We'll just dive into some of our prepared questions. And for those of you who may have joined after the introduction, again, please feel free to ask us questions, but we'll try to wrap up our prepared questions around 6:45, then kind of open it up to Q&A. So love to hear from you as well. But to get the questions flowing, we'll start with a few we prepared in advance. So with that, I think I'll start again with David to expand a little bit upon why you decided to study in this field and what was your focus while at the Carter School when you were a student?
So my focus has changed several times over the course of my career. Early on, I got into conflict resolution because I wasn't happy in practicing the type of law I was practicing. So you have a large group of lawyers who in the 1990s and 2000s started to change their practice from something that was more litigation. I was doing a lot of litigation to something that was more mediation based. So I was focusing on family mediation. I was a family mediator for several years. That focus then changed really more into education. So I started focusing more on advancing peace and conflict resolution in higher education. So I was teaching at a community college. I taught at a 4-year liberal arts institution. I've taught at Georgetown. And so kind of that change then really focused then on promoting education. When I went to USIP, the U.S. Institute of Peace, what I really started to focus on at that point was careers, in a sense, and looking at what people could do in the field. That led me to write a book, publish a book in 2016 on peacebuilding careers, looking at, well, one of the things I recognize, I've been in the field a while, and we have not done a good job of articulating and developing pathways for aspiring peace builders or conflict resolvers, we would say. It hasn't been an easy road. Part of it has to do with the kind of ambiguity of the field. Part of it has to do with the broad reach of the field. There are a lot of people who do conflict work, but they wouldn't recognize each other. Part of it also has to do with being able to make the case outside of our field. We're often talking to each other outside of the field of the value of what we do. And that's why mainstreaming is really important. So my focus has now changed to careers and advancing that and trying to get us to think a kind of in non-traditional ways, you would say, or non-conventional ways of how to incorporate the work that we're doing in the field. So that's kind of where it is. How the Carter School has informed my career path. One is it's given me an opportunity to teach, which I think is something that I've really liked, and to work with master's and Ph.D. students. But also, I think what it has done is it's helped me recognize the eclectic nature of the field more, because the Carter School is somewhat eclectic also, right? We have students that come in the Carter School who are interested in being domestic mediators, and we have people at the Carter School who want to work at the UN. Okay, that's a big chasm, right, between those two. So we have a lot of people. We have people in the Carter School who want to do consulting. We have people in the Carter School who want to use the arts. We have people in the we have a joint master's in social work and a master's in conflict resolution. So we already are inherently eclectic when we come into it. So it's helped me appreciate that and come to understand that a little bit more too. So thanks, Fitz.
Awesome. Yeah, I might even share some of my thoughts after we go around, because I think
an example of it, I think.
Yeah, exactly. I think we all have a good reason for being at the Carter School, and they're all very different. So that really resonates. Josh, I'll turn it to you to expand upon anything you'd like to add about why you chose to study the field, and really kind of how the Carter School was part of that.
Sure. Well, so it's sort of it's not a linear story in any way, shape, or form. I was actually a history major in college, and my mom's family, my mother was Canadian, and I went, and they had like a family business there, and I went there after college to see if I was going to enjoy working there. They were looking for somebody from my generation to sort of run it, and I could tell pretty quickly it wasn't exactly what I wanted to do. And I happened to talk to a friend of mine who called me and said, "How's it going up there?" I said, "Oh, it's all right." And but I'm probably coming back soon to the Boston area. And I said, "How are you doing?" He said, "Oh, I just bought a round the world ticket. I'm going backpacking for a year." I said, "Really? That's interesting." And he said, "Well, why? Do you want to go?" And I said, "Yeah." And I ended up going backpacking for an entire year, and living and sort of teaching English and doing things to make ends meet, etc. But one of the things that happened was that conflict was a theme. Wherever I went, I always sort of saw it at macro, micro levels. And so when I came back, and my grandmother's family all perished in the Holocaust, so it was a narrative that also was a big part of my upbringing. And when I got back, I knew I wanted to do something, and I got into American University for my master's, and they said, well, you're in the international relations program, but you have to pick a concentration. And so I opened the manual, and peace and conflict resolution literally sort of flew off the page. And I was like, I didn't know you could study that. Remember, this is 1993, so the field was a lot less developed back then. And it just clicked, and I went and got a fire lit under me. And then, for me, in terms of Mason, I think I actually had other offers to go other places. There were times where my parents thought I was crazy because I had full scholarships to these other places, and I chose Mason, which I didn't have a full scholarship for, because there were 10 faculty who were working on this in a lot of different ways. I think David's terminology of it being eclectic and covering a lot of ground and giving students a diversity of perspectives and ideas was really valuable to me. And I also felt like when I was there, I did internships at the Brookings Institution at the Carnegie Commission for Preventing Deadly Conflict. And I was able to tie what I was doing back to very practical things and very tangible issues. And so that being able to root my education in practicalities and wanting to work through, those kinds of things was really, really valuable. And so I would say that those things helped a lot. And I also would simply add finally that, I think having spent time in the DC area and then in the Boston area, and working with William out in Colorado, where he's based, I've sort of gotten to know these different groupings and communities of people. And the field's not that big, but it is all about relationships, as I'm sure we'll get to that. And it's, building relationships is the essence of how you succeed in any career, but this one in particular, I think is incredibly important. So it's a bit of a winding answer, but that's the reality of my experience.
That's great. I think that the travel, certainly for me, kind of helps support why I really appreciate having gone to the Carter School with my career at Hilton. Obviously, that makes a lot of sense. So I'll share a little bit more about my thoughts after we hear from Raquel.
So let me see. I graduated from undergrad in 2007 from George Mason, and then I worked for 4 or 5 years. And as I mentioned earlier, I had been doing some, I would say, community organizing as part of Barack Obama's presidential campaign. And that on the ground agitation and mobilization was something that I brought with me through the rest of my career. To this day, I still organize when I'm trying to get something accomplished. That's my way of change management. But that became a tension for me because I started working at the US Department of Energy and was now suddenly in this super structured bureaucracy environment where I felt ivory tower disconnected from the people. So I'm watching, and I'm really fortunate to be able to travel along with my boss on some international trips that were designed to reach agreements, massive agreements on scientific research and advancing that work. And watching how people approach those conversations, how they prepared for things, I realized that it was all conflict analysis and resolution. And I became really interested in sort of a public diplomacy approach. So I wanted to go to Peace Corps. I was like, I want to get back with the people. So originally I was looking at a program through SIT, the Center for International Training, if you're familiar with them. And I was all thinking I was going to move forward with that. And then George Mason reached out to me. I got an email or a call, I don't remember. And they were like, hey, I don't know if you know this, but we started a new program where you can get 2 master's degrees in 1 year and study in the beautiful island of Malta. And I was like, hold on, is this real? Is this a joke? Is somebody playing with me right now? I was like, 2 degrees in half the time for half the money on a beautiful island, sign me up. So off I went, and I was with Fitz. Fitz was in my cohort. And it ended up being incredibly valuable for me because the sort of conflict mapping, which we call power mapping in organizing, all of the skills that I learned about how to assess, you know, who the key players are, what their interests are, really is something that I use all the time in my work to try and figure out how to identify allies, how to negotiate effectively. These have been skills that I have used in everything that I do ever since then. And so even though I've sort of been on the fringes, I think as was discussed before, like kind of not in a traditional like peace building or even like national security space, which is more what I hear described as in the DC government culture that I've been in. I still have found that to be an incredibly useful experience. And I ended up doing my thesis or on this topic of what are the shared principles between community organizing and diplomatic negotiation, and how can we sort of cross-pollinate that to be more effective in both spaces. And so that was what I was interested in for my research. And I think that again has like been incredibly valuable for me, because even in my volunteer work, the way that I'm trying to advance peace building in my work is that I'm basically trying to help build the next generation of leaders. So I do a lot of leadership development training with younger folks to help them prepare like how they can be change agents in these spaces and could be advancing some of these, what to me are sort of progressive ideals in spaces that are a little resistant to that. So that's been my journey, and I've really found it to be very valuable. And hope that if you are here considering attending the Carter School, that you'll take this as a sign that you should.
Yes. Thanks, Raquel. Yeah, so I think I can certainly resonate with all three of you a little bit. It's actually really cool to hear from all of you. Certainly, I can resonate with Raquel's experience in Malta. So if you asked me why did I choose to go to the Carter School, that, you know, being on an island in the Mediterranean for a little over a year was definitely part of it. But just like the rest of the group said, I think I had a background in hospitality throughout my undergraduate studies and actually through high school. I went right to the Carter School right after I got my undergraduate degree. And you know, I never expected to be in hospitality. I never expected to stay, but I've been in hospitality 15 years now. And since graduating, have had experiences involving currently actually negotiating contracts for labor suppliers. Also, in the past, have done labor negotiations and kind of cost modeling for union discussions. So I think, you know, really what I would say is you can come from any background and find a lot of value in the program and end up in a great career. So with that, I'll shift gears just a little bit and we'll go around the room again and kind of get your advice. So David, starting again with you, looking back, is there anything you would have done differently to get where you wanted to go professionally than what you did in your career so far?
You know, I read these questions this afternoon, which we're supposed to do, and I thought a lot about that, and I'm not so sure I would have done anything differently. I mean, I'm not to say that I've made the right decisions. I think a lot of the things we kind of fall into in life, right? So it's not like I consciously am a great decision maker and I make the best choices, but I've been fortunate and I've made the right connections to where I am. So, you know, I was always I moved around a lot, right? I worked in domestic conflict, international conflict. I run a small NGO, does humanitarian education. I teach, I've written, I'm consulting, I'm career coaching. I really enjoy what I do, right? One thing that, this is not a regret, but just to show you how things kind of are not what you expect. I went into the Carter School as a PhD student. So I was on a Fulbright. It was the Fulbright experience when I was in Estonia. teaching alternative resolution that really got me to think about it. And I applied to the PhD program, got in. I didn't finish it. I'm a PhD flunky, right? And I enjoyed the PhD program. I actually started with Julie Shedd and people, great colleagues who finished it. But there was a point in taking courses in the PhD that there were decisions we had to make at home. My wife wanted to go back to school and she needed to get a degree. And I wasn't really starting to question whether I needed it and so forth. So I ended up getting a master's degree. So it's not so much regretting, but to recognize that sometimes the best laid plans don't really work out the way you want them. And you've really just got to take advantage of that. I don't regret not finishing it. I got a master's degree taking mostly PhD courses, which are a little unusual. But just the relationships over the years developed both at the master's and the PhD level have been really, really important to me. So I don't know. I don't say there's anything that I really regret in that sense of the word that I would have done differently. I think I've taken advantage of the things that have been presented to me. Some days I wish I could do more, but no, no regrets at this point. No.
That's great. Well, I guess what I'd like to do before we turn over to Raquel and Josh actually is give Halane a little bit of an opportunity as well to introduce himself a bit further. And maybe Halane, you can share with us your career journey and looking back, anything you would have maybe done differently or not in that journey.
Thank you, Fitz. In fact, when I joined ICAR, the school was then ICAR, I was with Save the Children, and I came out of Africa, surfed in Angola, with a conflict between the government and UNITA, and then been successful to get the humanitarian across the borderlines or no man's land. And then I was moved to Sudan, South Sudan, Nuba, the same problem is. And I found out this program at George Mason University. So I asked the organization to move me here so I can study this program, and I did. And then took every opportunity to see any theories, systematic approach that can help me not to solve conflicts. I have my reservation whether conflicts are resolvable. Violent social conflicts are very difficult to resolve, but how to cope with, how to help the communities in my case, which when I left the ICAR, the last program I took was this program, they used to call it comparative peace processes, in which we studied Anglo-Irish conflict, Cyprus, Israeli-Palestinian conflict. When I came back, I was thinking whether I'm wasting my time, whether conflicts are resolvable. When you see in Cyprus, the UN peacekeepers are still sitting between the Greeks and the Turkish in the island, facing each other since 1974. When you see the Northern Ireland, the Republicans and the Unionists, you can't tell even the difference who they are, and you cannot cross from this side of the road to the other side for centuries, for what? And then I became obsessed to look successful cases where social violent conflict are resolved, whether it is military wars or civil wars. Probably World War II, maybe the European wars were the best, where one side is defeated and then transform it. But if you look everything else, it is a serious challenge. So probably what I learned, I applied how to survive, how to cope, how to help with the communities. And I was successful to cross an area that no one can cross, from MBLA, the government side in Angola, to UNITA, using the name of the Save the Children. Items we call neutral, health, children. When you tell the both sides, we had measles on the UNITA side, and I went to the governor of Kwanza Sul, and I said, these children are your children. Would you allow us to go and vaccinate? And he said, yes. But can you cross the border? These guys will shoot you. And he said, let them shoot me. And when I crossed it, these guys were so happy we come and vaccinated the children. But the conflict is still, even though UNITA was defeated, the conflict, social violent conflict, is destroy not only the physical destruction, facilities, killing, but the psychology of the people. And I said, I'm actually considering to come back and do the PhD. But to be honest, when I see what happened in Iraq, I was there in 2003. I was in Sudan, was in Angola, in Somalia, covered most of the violent conflicts, and I still see little change even today. I become somewhat demoralized and question the concept of conflict resolution, probably conflict containment, conflict management, conflict reduction, maybe coping, but I became somewhat skeptical of conflict resolution concept as a concept.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting. And thank you for sharing your story, Halane. I can definitely, while I can't relate to what you're saying, I think it's really powerful and meaningful to hear how your experiences have informed your opinions of, certainly wouldn't necessarily say you would do things differently or that there are regrets, but certainly how you've kind of developed your thoughts. It's really interesting to hear. So, well, Raquel and Josh, we can move on to another question unless you want to share. Are there any things in your mind that you would have done differently with your career? Or do you feel that, like David, everything has gone exactly the way it should, or near exactly the way it should?
I mean, I would just add something very quickly, which is, and I would sort of echo what David said, which is that, I think the field, one of the great benefits for me is that I was very flexible in how I went into this and went where the opportunities were. And I think it's really important. I had some friends who were, this kind of specialist or that kind of specialist, and they didn't take on challenges that were in front of them because they didn't feel like they could manage that. And I think you have to have a little bit of be able to come to grips with the notion of that you might fail doing some of these things, but that they're all growth opportunities. And I think the one, just in terms of a regret, when I started this program, like a lot of people, I tended to be a bit more of an accommodator in my orientation. And I learned the value of being assertive, and I learned the value of asking. I had a colleague at Harvard at the program on negotiation who had on his door a sign that said, if you ask and the answer is no, you feel stupid for 5 minutes. If you never ask, you feel stupid the rest of your life. And I think it's really important that if in fact you struggle to assert for yourself and advocate, and you need to embrace that, because it's not something that people will do for you. And I think it's really important. I really wish I had embraced that sooner, because I think there were other opportunities that I might have been able to have taken that I didn't, because it took me a little while to understand why that was so important. And I, the master's degree program that I run, at the undergraduate level, it's a women's university. At the graduate level in Massachusetts, it has to be open to all genders. But basically about 85% of the students are women. And I would say that their primary challenge is is assertiveness and that ability. And these are mid-career folks who are generally, who really struggle to do that. So if it's something that you have a hard time doing, it's something I would really encourage you to work on and to try to become comfortable with, because it's very important for your career.
Yeah, that's great advice.
Can I build on something really quickly that Joshua said about asking? One of the things that I find is a lot of students don't want to ask for help, don't want to ask for like an informational interview. That a lot of the younger starting off field feel like, well, why would they approach a Joshua Weiss? He's not going to give me any time. And I'm kind of intimidated by him in the first place. So the asking is also about kind of the guidance, but the Joshua Weisses in the world give their time. We're in a field where we want to bring in a new generation. We want, we're not going to do this work forever. We want to encourage people to come. So the asking is not only what Joshua is talking, but it's really as you develop your career to ask for an informational interview or to have coffee with someone or someone to look at your resume. There are a lot of generous people in our field who are willing to give up their time. And rarely does somebody is so busy that they're not going to do it. So I want to put that out there and think about.
Great points. Thank you. Raquel, I'll turn it over to you because I know you have something you'd like to share on this as well. So looking forward to hearing it.
Thanks. Yeah, as I was hearing everybody else talk, I was reflecting on a piece of my story that I totally forgot until now. So it's not a regret. It's actually I'm glad this didn't happen. When I graduated in 2012 from the Carter School, I was super excited to get into this work. And I think I applied to 150 different jobs and I had a whole spreadsheet that, I was tracking when I followed up, make sure I don't let it sit too long. Networking, having all the coffees, all the lunches, and not a single one of those things worked out. I had a lot of interviews, nothing worked, right? I ended up working at Peace Corps in the headquarters in Washington, D.C., and that was an amazing experience. I love that experience. I look forward to being part of the growing number of Peace Corps volunteers that are retirees. And at the same time, I was interested in becoming a Foreign Service Officer, State Department. So I went through that test, the big exam that you may be familiar with or have heard of. And it's really hard, and it's notorious for being incredibly difficult. And there's a lot of people who fail several times before they're even able to get in. And I failed by half a point. And I remember being so frustrated at that moment and sort of oh, just a little bit more. But at the same time saying, I don't want to be at the bottom of the list either, because then you don't know where you're going to get placed, right? And ultimately, that has been the fact that I did not move forward, completely has changed the trajectory of my life, right? I could be traveling to different countries every couple of years, and instead I've been pretty US based. So it's really shifted my career. But ultimately, looking back, I'm really grateful that I did not end up there. And so this is Raquel hat, no longer representing the university, because I would never have been able to be a foreign service officer under the Trump administration. I would have quit and I would have just given up that whole career anyway. So it actually worked out for me the way that I think was supposed to, I guess maybe to David's point about it working out the way, it needed to happen how it happened so that I could be where I am right now. And so I guess just to add to that something adding to what I think Josh said, even if it feels like a failure in the moment, it may be exactly what you need when you look back and you'll reflect and say, oh, I'm glad that worked out the way it did. So just another perspective to share about kind of going with not necessarily going with the flow, but thinking that there is a broader picture and you may not understand how each step in your life feeds into that.
Yeah, that's great thoughts too, Raquel. I can definitely relate to those things, including having taken the Foreign Service exam and decided not to go that path as well. We do want to leave plenty of time for questions, but I think we'll go around one more time and kind of really allow you all to share any final remarks before we open it up for Q&A. But to kind of inspire those remarks, I'll combine a few of the questions, which is best career decision, worst career decision, or any advice you'd give your younger self. Take any one of those, and we'd love to hear one last remark. David, start with you.
Best career decision, worst career decision. Best career decision was probably leaving my college. I was a tenured faculty member. I could still be there today. When I resigned, people said, why are you giving up the brass ring to do something else? But I really wanted to do something else. I had been teaching predominantly in the legal field, and I had decisions to make with my family. My wife and I wanted to move in an area that provided more opportunities for our children. And I was living outside of Baltimore, which is a great city. I'm a native Baltimorean. I left Baltimore and moved to Montgomery County, and I left my college and went to USIP, which is really very, very different types of experiences. So that was the best decision I ever made.
Awesome, thanks. Josh, how about you?
Honestly, I think the best, there are two really, and I'll be brief about each one of them. When I first, kind of like Raquel, when I was finishing my master's and I was wanting to move back to Boston, I sort of carpet bombed the area with my resume. And I think I applied to 40 or 50 organizations, and only one came back to me, and it was the program on negotiation. And it was for a part-time job, writing and editing role play simulations, which is not exactly what I thought I would be doing with a master's degree, but it was a foot in the door, and I knew that was important, and that is key. So I think in one sense, despite the fact that it wasn't exactly what I hoped and imagined, it was a good decision to do that and go down that road. And the other really quick one that I'll mention is that I spent a lot of time when I was working on my Ph.D. as my proposal. I was writing my proposal and things along those lines. I spent quite a bit of time trying to get funding so that I could just work on my dissertation. And I was fortunate to get a number of different fellowships. One of them was, again, back to relationships from the program on negotiation. And so I pieced together 3 fellowships that I got. And again, I probably sent out 150 applications trying to get resources, because I had just gotten married, and my first daughter was on the way. And I really wanted to make sure that I didn't get caught in the PhD trap, which is that, family and work and all of those things get in the way, and it makes it very, very hard to finish. So I was really lucky that basically I finished my dissertation in about 1.5 years, because I had the resources to kind of just focus on that and not get distracted by all of these other things. So I think that was probably one of the best decisions, because then I could, move on and move into a full-fledged career. Oh, and by the way, if you do a dissertation, William Ury, my colleague, as I mentioned before, probably gave me the best advice about doing a dissertation. He said, the only good dissertation is a finished one. So don't try to make it your magnum opus, your greatest work in life, because you have 4 or 5 people sitting on your shoulder saying, try a different word, try a different concept, things like that. Pick something that's doable, manageable, that's interesting to you, but that you can get done.
Makes sense. Thanks, Josh. Raquel, over to you.
Thanks, Fitz. There's a couple of things that are coming to mind. One is that, there are seasons to our lives. And for me, what I discovered is that as I was younger, I had a lot more energy. And so I was able and willing and eager to get involved in the thorniest of issues, the most complicated, like energy draining issues. And that is not necessarily the same as I get older, right? So my energy levels are not as high as they were. And so I think just reflecting on that and remembering that we have different seasons in our lives, and You could have multiple careers over that time, and you could focus on different things at different stages, depending on where you are and what's important to you. And part of that is, I think I can't remember who it was, but someone earlier was talking about the importance of networking. So part of that is about those relationships that you're building, particularly this is a small community. And so you'll often see the same people over and over. So I think two pieces about that. One is, I told you about how I applied to all these jobs, I didn't get any. Almost every single position that I have gotten in my life has been through networking, like 99% of them. And so my advice is that if you can think of networking as building long-term relationships and less about transactional, I think that that ends up being better for you, for both parties involved. There's been plenty of times when someone has said, hey, follow up with me. And then 6 months later, you know, maybe they're like, I'm glad you followed up with me because I have something in mind for you. And if I didn't, then I might have missed out on that opportunity, right? So just encouraging people to like actually follow up if someone encouraged you to. And think about networking as like trying to build sort of a friendship or some sort of, you know, amicable relationship that's going to be long term. It's not like you're just asking for a favor and you need help right now. So those are the couple of things. And then one other thing you just made, I actually just thought of was that I've also done some consulting and operated in more traditional like national security spaces. And I would just say that if you are a person who has a deep interest in diversity, equity, inclusion, racial justice, social justice, those spaces can be particularly draining and challenging. And so just know that if that's where you want to go, you're going to need all that energy I was talking about to survive, to get through, and to make change.
Can I build on something that Raquel said?
Please.
You know, this networking is really important. In the networking, you have to give something to get something, right? So when you're networking, be prepared to present what your added value is. I'm just not extracting from you. I do want to have a relationship with you. I do have something to bring. Whether your networking's on LinkedIn, which I think is a really valuable means, whether you're at a conference and you're talking to somebody, that I'm just not asking for a favor. I want to be a collaborator with you and do something there. The other thing that I would say is the future of our field is about intersectionality. That is looking at conflict and peace building and intersecting it in spaces that maybe 10 years ago we wouldn't have said, like climate change or migration. And these are fields that if I had said 10 years ago, there's a relationship between a migration and conflict, people would have said, no, there is. We know that. Climate change and conflict, no, but we know that there is today. And that's really the exciting spaces in our field, right? Those places that we know can benefit from what we're doing because they're getting increasingly active. And diversity, for instance, diversity is a wonderful thing, but let me tell you, diversity brings conflict, right? Any place that has diversity has people that need us to help mine the place. I will tell my clients about diversity. You know, when I was younger, diversity was if you had 10 people in an office, diversity was 7 white guys, 2 black guys, and a white woman, and we were done. That was diversity, right? That's not what diversity looks like today, right? Diversity is very different. And from that comes the need to understand, the need to bridge differences, the need to reach out, all things that are in the conflict resolution toolkit, if you will, the things that we bring. So think about that intersection today.
Thanks, David. That's great. I think just like we started this call, Halane, if you have anything to add as well, best decision, worst decision, or advice for your younger self, please share as well, but up to you. Looks like you might be muted, Halane. There you are.
Well, I was really grateful what Professor Sandor said in his book, the complexity of conflict was always wherever I go in my mind. And I know a situation I was dealing is not easy, it's complex. So that background helped me to prepare for a complex situation and be able to deal with. But I think what we need to focus more is there's so many different conflicts. If we're talking dispute resolution, family conflict is, labor conflict is, that's a different thing. If we're talking wars and violent social conflicts, that is a completely different thing. And I think with countries like the US or the West, where the justice system is good, there is so many mechanisms to deal with the disputes to resolve. But in other countries where the judiciary system, either if I take, for example, in Africa, it is so weak, or it doesn't exist. That is what also complicates the conflict is when you don't have other legal mechanism to take your grievances and disputes, then you use the gun. So that's one of the problems. So I think what and the US government was in one way or the other involved in all major conflicts outside of the US, whether it is Middle East or Africa, and could play a good role. Still, with all the mistakes, faults made, still people are still hoping the US will remain in a leadership role. So I think it's important. The global order, I think probably we need it more today because of not only the conflict is, but also the climate change, the drought is, the migration, the crises are increasing or multiplying, and this country can still remain to be a leader. That's why I think the universities and the schools that are looking the conflicts, we shouldn't be looking internal conflicts and easier conflict aside, but to look the global order and the conflicts that can impact the entire world. And I think Carter School is a very good school. I think I think there are a number. I think the curriculum is very clear on social conflicts, but I think sometimes we focus more on easier conflicts rather than looking the more complex, more global affecting conflicts. Like when the Iraq war was there, I was there. I was so devastated because the Iraqis were helping the US government to come in and remove Saddam Hussein. I thought the US government had a government ready whenever they took a district administration to put in and put law and order. They had only military plan. Then they destroyed the military and everything, and that was it. The country was, the first city I went to was Basra. And the public health library, which had 50 years, every disease agent that no one in Iraq was restored in that library was destroyed completely. How you can rebuild that society, how you can, where to start. So I think the universities will have to be, the US universities will have to take a much bigger leader role in focusing more on the global conflicts, because US is a global leader. That is my kind of advice. But I never regretted what I learned. It helped me a lot. But I didn't see conflict as resolved also in my experience.
No, that's a great perspective too, Halane. Thank you so much. Well, those are the end of our kind of prepared questions. We can go on, of course, but we'd love to hear from you. We do have about 27 people on the call. So we'd invite you to either put a comment into the chat box, raise your hand, or we can be bold and go right off mute. But it looks like Heather already has a question. So we'll start with Heather R. So Heather, if you want to come off mute, and then others, you can put your hands up or send us a chat and we'll get to you after Heather.
Okay, I had to pick the right button on my speaker, sorry. So from what I'm hearing from a lot of you is you had an interest in the area and you're working in fields that deal with the area of conflict, but at a variety of settings, and so dealing with it in a variety of ways rather than like sort of honing in on a particular one, which is more what I'm doing. And I know that makes my path more difficult because I'm not really sure how to move into that. So what my area of focus in and what I came very specifically to Carter School to address is US mass violence and extremism. And I do some research indirectly related to that as my job right now, but myself and others at my company, we see a lot of issues with the way that the people, what we call partners and sponsors who pay for this research are doing, and what we see that they really should be doing. And one of the difficulties that I think a lot of us are facing is how do we get into those areas where we can really affect change, but with the people who are paying for the research that needs to be done to affect that change, while they still have in their mindset and in their hiring practices and in the way that they choose what to and not to fund a particular angle to go toward. So I didn't know if now that you've had this experience in these fields to maybe have an understanding of how things work and any suggestions on, do I need to be sort of dropping the whole idea of research and be focusing on just political campaigning? Or is there some way that I can still target my research into an area that's going to be productive and actually make change in the way that people are researching these things?
Can I start off? So first of all, you're in a field that is kind of new to our field in a sense. Mass violence is not something that we as a field have really kind of focused on. And one of the things to think about is that's a field that's basically been owned by the criminal justice field, really, for many years, right? And one of the things that I always, will tell people is that if you're coming from our field, conflict resolution, and you want to get into a space that basically is kind of monopolized by another field, how do you make the case to that field that what you're offering them has value, right? If we had asked people, mass violence and research is all about prevention or response. Not prevention, actually. It's response for the most part. We do the prevention stuff. It's responding. I sit on my city police board, and it's all about police time and so forth. But when you talk about conflict resolution, you're often talking about prevention or alternative means to resolving. So you have to kind of get into those spaces, right? You have to get into the criminal space. You have to get to know law enforcement people. You have to be able to kind of get them to think about a different way because, well, their ways aren't always working, right? Kind of a thing. you know, I definitely, you know, one of the things also is the dichotomy between research and practice, right? I think is what you're pointing out also, is that, you know, we often are kind of split in saying, well, do I want to practice? Do I want to be a mediator or facilitator or do dialogue work or whatever it may be a teacher? Or do I want to do research, right? Do I want to write? Do I want to, you know, kind of work for a think tank, right? Kind of thing, right? And it often appears that those things don't meet. Well, they do meet, right? There are people that actually have their feet in both environments, right? They're doing research and they're applying the research. I mean, one of the challenges in the field is there's a lot of great research out there that's never really applied. And a lot of things that are applied, they're not based on research. So being able to bring those two things together can be very useful also. So don't give up on the connection between those two.
Were there any other questions from the group?
Yes, Fitz, do we have any intention to expand the school to outside of the US, to other universities like Africa, where conflicts are more common than here?
Great question. Maria, can we put you
Yeah,
on the
sure.
spot?
I'm happy to offer at least some context for that. You know, I think the way that we do that most commonly is through partnerships and I'm sorry, my dog is very loud right now.
Okay.
Partnerships with organizations and institutions that are on the ground, because we recognize that we are based in Northern Virginia primarily, and we are an institution that serves the Commonwealth, but we have this global mission. And I think the way that we can be meeting that is through those relationships, and we rely pretty heavily on them. So I think if there's one that you want to help facilitate or put us in touch with, we're eager and wanting to do that, and also relying on our alumni. I think that's where you see our real global footprint.
Yeah, I would say that, I mean, I look at the doctoral cohort, and I know Maria could speak to that, or Julie, tends to be predominantly international, and a lot of those internationals go home and they take their Carter experience and their Carter degree and they're teaching in Pakistan or in South Africa or somewhere else. They're taking it. So maybe they're not setting up a school, but they're taking the work from here and they're bringing it to another part of the world. That's really important. And we are actually, where we are, you may not know, is that we're in South Korea. So we are in other places. People don't necessarily know that we are there. We have a program there.
Yes, that's right.
I'll probably come over to the school and we will talk more about it. I have some ideas.
And there are plenty of conflicts domestically and within the United States that we need to be looking at too. So I think David's point is spot on, that we want to be educating people here and relying on what they bring to us too, to send our message wider.
And I think the point about the alumni is a good one too. So we've had an alumni chapter off and on over the history of the Carter School and its predecessors. But we are really trying to reboost engagement. So we really do invite you or anyone else with an interest in kind of participating in the Alumni Association, really helping us build it, expand, put on events, really share what the Carter School and what our alumni community are all about. So we'll share some contact information. We know several of you have to head to class or to other things. So we will stay on for a few more minutes, but what we'll do is I will go ahead and put my contact information into the chat. And then we would invite David, Josh, Halane, and Raquel, as well as I, to the extent you're comfortable, if you want to share your LinkedIn information in the chat. And then one other thing we do want to just share is there is a Carter School Careers LinkedIn page that we can share with you as well. David, you are a great participant there, but we we encourage you to join that page and add it to your LinkedIn feed in the event that there might be opportunities or contributions from all of you that you can take advantage of. But as I said, we still have 10 or even up to 20 minutes left. We are happy to stay on for those participants who are still here and keep answering questions.
Can I give one piece of advice?
Please.
I always ask people, what's your superpower? Find out what your superpower is and lead with your superpower. So when you're looking for work, we all have superpower. Maybe networking, might be research, it might be analysis, it might be something, right? Lead with your strength, identify what your superpower is. And when you're looking for work, that's where you come from, right? And that's where you're trying to offer yourself. Often people think a lot about, well, I've got to fix this or that or this about myself before I do it. And I'm not saying you don't have to do that, but we all have something about us that is kind of, we can knock the ball out of the park with that. Find out what that is and use that when you're looking for work.
That is a great takeaway. Thanks, David.
In the room, you'd find everybody's got a different superpower, and they kind of know what it is. They know what opens the doors for them, right? You know, Raquel, what's your superpower?
I just knew you were going to call on me. I mean, I do think networking is among my top couple of superpowers. I would say also organizing, like people.
Joshua, what's your superpower?
Well, yeah, I think it's, I mean, in so many ways, like I spent a lot of time engaging in building those relationships and cultivating them. And you know, it really is amazing how when you do that and you do it in a way that, you know, I take meetings all the time with people, to David's point before, you know, who want to know about the field because people took the time to do that for me. And it's always interesting how those things come back around. I mean, I literally 2 weeks ago, somebody got in touch with me and they said, you know, 5 years ago, you spoke to me about, you know, something and it was very helpful. And, you know, we want to do a negotiation training. And I immediately thought of you. And I had no intention of that happening, et cetera. So I think you can never go wrong if you have that orientation and that approach to building a career and getting to know people in your field, because it is who you know and the connections you have. I was working on a big project for Deloitte down in DC, and 4 of the people that I went to school with are working. Part of what I was working on was looking at dispute resolution design for federal agencies, and 4 of the people that I did my Ph.D. with at Mason were working at federal agencies, whether it was the FDIC or the Department of the Interior or TSA. And, you know, we knew each other, so I could sit down with them and they could be candid, and that's how it works. I mean, it really is. And, you know, the other thing is, and I've worked a lot at it. I'm still not a great writer, but I work hard at it. And I would just encourage you, you know, it's something that it's very important, you know, to be able to communicate both written and orally well is an incredibly important part of dealing with conflict. And so if those are places where you need to improve, I would just encourage you to keep working at those, because you can do a lot with words in a lot of different ways, and it's very powerful and a place to really invest your time and energy getting better and better at. And it's a journey. It's not a destination. You know, the best writers keep working at their craft.
Yeah. Well, we did get one more question. So if it's the last one, I think it's a great one to wrap up with. But again, we'll keep them coming if you have them. But the question from Joanne is, as youth or as beginners in this field, what particularly is our role? And when it comes to, but also when it comes to engaging in future careers. So a bit of a general question, but one that I think looks like, David, maybe you can provide some advice.
You know, when you're young, and I also think when you're older, but when you're young, what you bring is enthusiasm. You're enthusiastic about this. Something has affected you, happened in your life, you've observed something. You know, we are a field where if you survey 10 people in our field, I mean, there are three things you can have in life. You can have a job, you can have a career, and you can have a calling. And what you find is a lot of people in our field feel that they're doing this as a calling. They really need to make those changes. And people coming in have that, keep that. We as the older dogs need that. We need to be reminded of the enthusiasm that you bring, because some of us have been tempered and jaded and so forth over time, and it's not going to happen and so forth. Oh, I want to talk to you. I want you to get me going, right, about what you want to do. I want your enthusiasm to affect me so that I can get back into the game. So that's what you bring.
I think it's a great question and a great response. The way I would have answered it kind of similarly is, you know, do what you like as well. And I think, you know, that, David, your story earlier about all of your work in the legal field, and then you had the revelation that you just wanted something different, I think really applies to all of us. And you'll be successful if it's something that you like, and hopefully it'll become a calling. So.
I mean, I'll just say that, David, you summed up what I was trying to say earlier so well. Earlier, when I was saying there's different seasons in your life, this is what I was getting at, that like this kind of work can be draining and exhausting. And you get to a point in your life where you're just like, I can't fight this fight anymore, or at least not as hard as I was. You can get disillusioned, you can get jaded, you can get cynical, the whole bit. And so I agree. Like that's why I said I like to do leadership development for younger folks, because that inspires me. Like their energy and enthusiasm is what gets me to like get out of my funk and say, yes, we can do this, you know, and like get back to this like enthusiasm and this excitement about the work. And so definitely, I've come to personally believe that is just the cycle of life, that we need the younger generations to bring this enthusiasm and energy, because as the older folks are getting exhausted, they're like, I'll give you advice, but I don't have a whole lot of energy to do the like on the ground stuff as much anymore.
There are some days that I feel like Alexis's dog, believe me, right? I agree with that. So I need people to wake that dog up.
Fitz, I would add one quick other thing, which is, you know, I think what young people bring is you bring a new perspective, and you bring an ability to challenge the assumptions that have existed in the field forever, and to say, why is that? And is it not possible to do it differently? You know, we need some paradigm shifts. You know, it's fine to have processes and tried into processes, but it's also really important that people don't just accept the conventional ways to do this, and bring unorthodox creative ideas to this world, because we need new ways of trying to tackle these incredibly difficult problems. You know, I often feel like, you know, a lot of the processes we use are micro for macro challenges, and we need completely new ways of saying, well, wait a minute, if we're going to try to deal with these conflicts, how are we going to do that in a way that brings the enough sort of force and ability to tackle the dimensions of war once they're unleashed, and destructive conflict are incredibly powerful. So do we have processes that can mirror that in a positive way? And if we don't, then create them. Be the one to say, well, wait a minute, maybe we need an entirely new process here, and be the one to develop it.
Yeah, it goes back to your earlier advice about asking the questions and again, challenging those notions. That's great advice.
You know, what Josh was saying is that we hold a space of creativity. And that creativity is really important in what we do. Conflict is always changing, right? The things that we're dealing with conflict didn't exist 5 years ago. This is not like reading ancient Greek. We are changing daily. So the responses and the creativity we need is always in demand.
Yeah, we should really figure out how to use AI, for example, for productive purposes and ways of enhancing our ability to handle conflicts, as opposed to, and there's a tremendous and fascinating debate around artificial intelligence and things like that. And there's a realm of technology here that we have to embrace, and we have to sort of think about how do we bring that stuff into our field. We can't sit around using, the same old process. There's really interesting stuff that's out there that can aid the work that goes on here in fascinating ways.
Yeah, and that's the example of the intersectionality I was talking about, right? The intersection between artificial intelligence and conflict resolution. Wait a minute, what's that all about? That's where we're going. Find those intersections.
Definitely makes sense. And that I hadn't thought about, but I have a lot to think about. And I really can't thank you all enough. First of all of the people who joined. Thank you for joining our session. Thank you for the great chats and engagement. Of course, thank you, David, Josh, Raquel, and Halane for your outstanding perspectives, stories, contributions. Like we said earlier, we think we are all very happy to take your questions. Feel free to reach out to us via LinkedIn or by other means. And again, thank you to the Carter School for the journey you've taken us on. We look forward to continuing to be a part of it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a great night, everyone.